Hello friends, your buddy Phil here. I'm going to walk you through what I did in the world of project management in an aerospace defense firm in the IT effectiveness department. I was an IT project manager. I doubled as a program manager, but I'm going to focus on the IT project management piece of the enterprise software implementation that I worked on. Let's jump straight into my daily schedule. The first thing that typically happened was I would get in. My boss was an early bird. He was usually in very early, and we would have a daily touch base. He'd swing around and say, "How did yesterday night go?" Because this was a very intense project. I have to say I was working like 60-hour weeks at a minimum. So we would have touch bases of how what I was working on the night before went, how what I was working on went, did the tests pass, and so on and so forth. But more on that later. Between 8:30 and 9:30, there could have been a meeting with end users to observe work processes. One of the things that we actually used for this project to gain all the knowledge about the requirements was observation and conversation. So in some instances, I would actually go to where these IT people were working to understand how they were carrying out their work, to understand the flow of change requests, to understand the paper trail. You could say my job was also in some way related to business analysis, because a business analyst understands the business case, the reason why the project is being authorized, but also the business rules. And that's what I was doing in observation and conversation. So you who is looking to get into project management, be aware you may need to wear many hats, not just project management, but you also need to be able to look at a problem, understand the problem, find the root cause, or look at a business and understand why they're doing what they're doing, how they're doing what they're doing. And you should be able to draw at least some very basic data flows to show how data flows from one part of the business to another. This was big in this job. So documenting requirements based on user observation, and then after that, between 10:30 to 11, could have been an ad hoc meeting again with my manager. There were meetings that my manager had with me to say, "Phil, you need to be aware of the political landscape in this domain. Beware of this, that, or the other, or don't use words like this, that, or the other." Observe an email, right? So that's actually a good leader, because good leaders, they should take action and warn their people about blind alleys. So I had some of those meetings with my manager, and I was warned about the politics and given a good idea of the political landscape. 11 to 12, develop test scripts for the system. Honestly, this was a story of my life in this role. I developed so many test scripts. I could have actually gotten a degree in writing test scripts. By the time I was done in this job, I wrote so many. And I actually got good feedback from a lot of the individuals who ran the scripts, because they said, "Oh, these are so good. You needed to have seen the scripts that were written before you got here." So that was a learning experience. I really dove into it, got a lot of understanding of how to write these scripts, and I wrote them to the best of my ability. They worked really well. You as a project manager in a job, you might feel, "Well, I'm not really technical," or "I'm not supposed to be technical." Well, think again. It depends on the job. And if there's pressure on you to be technical, in other words, writing test scripts and use cases and running the tests, and you're not stepping up to the plate, that's not the best way to do it, my friend. You got to stretch, and that's exactly what I did. So I stretched my understanding, my capacity, and propensity. 12 to 1 was lunch. Lunch was good. The cafeteria was quite good. That particular job was preceded by another job where I worked in that same campus, but I had to go to another. So I was really happy to be back because the food was really good. I had lunch with my boss, and we had a good relationship, my boss and I. So we would sit down, eat lunch, or there would be other people that I would see that I knew, and I would have lunch with them. It was kind of cool. That was all pre-COVID, of course. And then 1 to 2, I could be involved in creating training material. I wrote training manuals, created training videos, really because there was no one else to step into that role to do it. So I did a lot of those things, creating videos and so on. 2 to 3, stakeholder meeting to discuss project progress. We had a lot of those big meetings. You got to remember, I had 7 stakeholders, and each one had their request. Roughly, let's say about 20 different unique requests. So can you imagine working on a project where you had about 120 different requirements, or user stories. Just imagine that. It was a lot of stuff. So our job was not only to execute on those requests, but it was also to track them and make sure that they were tested. So my plate was constantly full for like a full year, just completely full. I'll never forget when that project was done and I was able to move on to a different thing. So 3 to 3:30 ad hoc meeting with the consulting company that was involved in this rollout. We worked very closely with this company, but the company couldn't do all of our stuff for us. So it's more like a partnership. The company doing what they could, we taking what we needed to, putting the code into production, running it, or first of all, testing out in the sandbox before putting it into production and rolling out business unit by business unit, or group by group. So we had different groups we rolled out. So the whole concept of meeting with the consulting company and then 3:30 to 4:30 testing the system based on test scripts was really huge. In fact, my role, in addition to being a quasi project manager, program manager, was also the last test man, if you know what that means. It's that final person who the system needs to go through. That person who's looking for the bugs. And my boss would hate it because I would find the bugs. Because he's also technical and he would run certain final things, implement certain code, and I would be able to break it. And he didn't like it one bit. He liked it and he didn't like it at the same time. But that was fun. 4:30 to 5, emails, any important communication that needed to be sent out, updating project documentation and status. My boss was really big on keeping everybody in the loop and assuring people that it's going well. If there was any obstacle or any person who could be an obstacle, he always wanted us to handle it diplomatically. I remember one instance when we had sent out a survey, and I don't know if you have these in your company, but there's the survey police. In other words, people who have like a PhD in surveys. They know how to send surveys and the right questioning. And there was someone who had a meltdown about how the survey should be written and the wording of the sentences. So that was an interesting one. And I was able to observe how my boss was very diplomatic. You got to be diplomatic, in these project manager, program manager roles, because you're dealing with a lot of people. They've got diverse opinions. Sometimes they have a valid point. And even if you feel they don't have a valid point, you got to hear them out. And you got to respect and understand and see different points of view. So just that alone can suck the life and energy out of someone who isn't used to doing it. So you're wondering the life of a project manager. It has a lot to do with the interpersonal skills, the interpersonal relationships, and how you comport yourself, how you're always calm under pressure. You have to be. You cannot afford to lose it. If you've been in project management long enough, you know that voice that comes from the back of your head that says, don't say nothing. Listen. Be cool. Watch your countenance. And if you haven't experienced that, maybe you're just so disciplined that you've never had to, or the time is coming when you'll hear that voice. And you remember what I told you. All right. And finally, plan for the next day's tasks and meetings. And honestly, in a lot of instances, this would bleed into the night. This would not always end at 5:30 to 6. This could go on to like 7. In some instances where it was mega busy, it would be into the midnight because there would be a rollover, there would be a transition, and we'd be moving from one system or one aspect or one instance to another. Okay? And that's it. The world of an IT project manager for enterprise software implementation. I hope you found it useful. Don't forget to like, subscribe, share with your friends. And if you've got any questions at all about project management, program management, all things agile, PMP, scheduling, ACP, whatever the case, put it in the comments below. And of course, leadership. After all, this is the Project Leadership Institute channel, and I expect you might have questions on leadership. Thank you very much. I'll speak to you in the next video.